Hey there! Ever feel like interpreting a neonatal blood gas is like trying to solve a really complex puzzle? You've got all these numbers staring back at you, but what are they really telling you? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll give you a visual guide to become a master detective of acid-base dynamics, all centered around this simple idea of a balance scale. Ready to crack the case? Let's get started. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to cover the why of it all, the body's incredible balancing act. Then we'll learn to read our vital dashboard of numbers. After that, we'll walk through a super clear 3-step process to crack any case. Then we'll level up with the compensation rules, and finally, we'll put it all together to solve the mystery of metabolic acidosis. By the end, you'll be able to tackle any ABG with total confidence. Okay, first things first. Before we can start solving puzzles, we really have to understand the rules of the game. So this first section is all about why the body works so incredibly hard to keep everything in balance. So where does any good investigation begin? You have to know when to even look for clues. So when do we actually need an arterial blood gas, or an ABG? Well, it really boils down to 3 big questions. 1, is something tipping our acid-base scale? 2, how well is this baby actually breathing, oxygenating and ventilating? And 3, are there any dangerous abnormal hemoglobins hanging out in the blood? An ABG is our #1 tool for looking into all 3 of these. And this right here, this shows you exactly why this matters so much. The body's absolute top priority, it will do almost anything, is to keep its pH perfectly balanced right around 7.40. If that scale tips too far down into acidemia or way up into alkalemia, the body's most critical functions just start to fail. This balance isn't just important, it's everything. So who's in charge of this balancing act? Well, meet our 2 key players. On one side, you have the lungs. They're the fast responders, acting within minutes to hours by blowing off or retaining carbon dioxide, which acts like an acid. And on the other side, you have the kidneys. They're our slow and steady powerhouse, taking days to adjust bicarbonate, which is our base. Just remember this duo: fast lungs, slow kidneys. All right, let's move on to section 2. Every detective has to know how to read their instruments, right? So now we're going to learn to read our clinical dashboard. These are the key numbers we need to have memorized so we can spot when a clue is out of place. And here it is, your neonatal dashboard. The pH, that should be sitting comfortably between 7.35 and 7.45. The PCO2, which is what our lungs control, should be between 35 and 45. And the HCO3, or bicarbonate from the kidneys, should be between 22 and 26. These are the goalposts, the normal ranges we're always comparing against. Now, it's not just about the numbers, it's about where you got them from. The source of the blood sample is super important. Arterial is the gold standard, for sure. But let's be real, we often use capillary or venous samples. The big takeaway here is this: a capillary gas is fantastic for checking ventilation and metabolic status, but, and this is a big but, it is not a reliable way to measure oxygenation. That's a critical difference you have to remember. Okay, now for the real heart of our investigation. We've got the background, we know the normal numbers. Section 3 is where we get our simple, repeatable 3-step process to systematically crack any blood gas that comes your way. Here's the whole process in a nutshell. Step 1, just look at the pH. Is it low, meaning acidotic? Or is it high, meaning alkalotic? Simple. Step 2, now glance at the PCO2 and the bicarb. Which one of those actually explains the pH shift? That's what tells you if the primary problem is respiratory or metabolic. And finally, step 3, check for compensation. Is the other system jumping in to help fix things? Let's dig into step 2 with a really great mnemonic, ROME. It stands for respiratory opposite, metabolic equal. So if the pH is low but the PCO2 is high, see how they're moving in opposite directions? That points to a respiratory problem. But if the pH is low and the bicarbonate is also low, they're moving in the same or equal direction. And that tells you it's a metabolic problem. It's a super handy trick. And now for step 3, compensation. Once you've found the main culprit, look at the other value. Think of it like this. If the PCO2 and bicarbonate are moving in the same direction, it means the body is trying to compensate. The backup system is fighting back. But if they're moving in opposite directions, that's a huge red flag. That means you've got a mixed disorder, and both systems are actually pushing the pH in the wrong direction. The body is failing. Okay, we're leveling up now. We're moving into the more advanced part of the analysis. See, it's not enough to just know if the body is compensating. A master detective can predict exactly how much it should be compensating. Welcome to Section 4. So, for a metabolic acidosis, our go-to tool is something called Winter's formula. This equation is awesome. It tells you exactly what the PCO2 should be as the lungs try to compensate. You just plug in the patient's bicarb, and it spits out a target range. If the actual PCO2 is in that range, the compensation is appropriate. And hey, for a quick check at the bedside, there's a great hack. The expected PCO2 should be pretty close to the last 2 digits of the pH. Now, for respiratory issues, we use the 1-3-2-4 rule. This tells us how the kidneys should be responding. For every 10-point change in the PCO2, here's what happens. In acute acidosis, bicarb goes up by 1. In chronic acidosis, it goes up by 3. In acute alkalosis, bicarb drops by 2. Now here's the most crucial part, so listen closely. In chronic respiratory alkalosis, the bicarbonate drops by 4. A lot of people get this wrong and think it's 5 or 6, but the correct compensation is a drop of 4. Remember that sequence, 1, 3, 2, 4. And here we have it all in one place, your ultimate cheat sheet. This is pretty much the key that unlocks all of compensation. It sums up every single formula we just talked about, whether the problem is metabolic or respiratory, acute or chronic. Seriously, this is the one reference you can come back to every single time you need to figure out what the body should be doing. We've made it to our final section. So let's say we've identified a metabolic acidosis, and we know the lungs are trying to help out. But our investigation is not over yet. We still need to find the root cause. And that final, crucial clue is hidden in a calculation called the anion gap. So what are the triggers? When should the alarm bells start ringing that you need to do this deeper dive? You're looking for a pH below 7.35, a bicarbonate below 20, and a base deficit that's greater than 5. By the way, that base deficit is just a fancy way of saying how much base you'd need to add to get the pH back to normal. When you see this trio of clues, your very next thought should be, I have to calculate the anion gap. So what in the world is the anion gap? It's actually way simpler than it sounds. It's just a value we calculate from the electrolytes. We basically add up the positive ions and subtract the negative ones we've measured. The leftover number, the gap, represents unmeasured anions. And a high or widened anion gap is a huge red flag. It's telling you that some kind of nasty organic acid, like lactate, is building up in the blood. Now, this one calculation creates a really clear fork in the road for your diagnosis. If the anion gap is normal, you've got a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, or NAGMA. This is usually caused by just losing bicarbonate directly. But if the anion gap is high, you have a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, or HAGMA. This is caused by that scary buildup of a new acid, often from really serious stuff like sepsis or tissue hypoxia. And figuring out which path you're on is absolutely critical for choosing the right treatment. And there you have it, a systematic, visual way to decode any neonatal blood gas. You know the players, you have the 3-step method, and you can calculate both compensation and the anion gap to find the root real cause. The next time a blood gas result hits your screen, you'll have all the tools you need to be that clinical detective. You've decoded the clues. Now what's your diagnosis?